So what does all this matter? I know sometimes all this academia can seem sort of pointless to people who aren't on a college campus each day. And if people question the need for studying Shakespeare or Descartes, I imagine they might really begin to holler when we start holding up role-playing games as something worthy of study. It's a bunch of nerds rolling dice. How in the world might it connect to anything that really matters? Setting aside the rest of the argument, which falls outside the scope of my talk and would require too much time to really rebut, I wanted to provide one very recent example of a way in which role-playing games have impacted our lives and our country. Remember January 6th, when rioters stormed the US Capitol building? What if I were to tell you much of what inspired those rioters could be traced back to role-playing games? Allow me to explain. Many people have been comparing QAnon to augmented reality games months before the attack on the Capitol. QAnon, of course, was the online-based group who were convinced the world was being run by a cabal of pedophiles in Hollywood and DC. They believed Donald Trump would lead a movement to violently overthrow that cabal. This might sound like something straight out of a bad comic book, but this same movement inspired many to take real-life actions to stop these nefarious pedophiles. Famously, one man attacked a Comet ping pong pizza shop in DC back in 2016, convinced that a pedophile ring was being run by the Democrats in the restaurant's basement. So it's not like there wasn't precedent for online rumors to spur people to action. In a typical augmented reality game, clues are given out bit by bit, inspiring players to crack the clues and go to find the next step of the puzzle. The movie and film Ready Player One describes one such ARG. It's all fun and games when it's created ahead of time and there's a surprise at the end, but with QAnon, participants were told the government was corrupt, and it was up to them to decipher clues dropped by the anonymous Q that would lead them to the center of that corruption. For a long time, I used to play a segment from the Colbert Report, where Stephen Colbert would talk about Wikipedia, highlighting how the platform could allow people to agree on their own reality. He called it a Wickiality, and that word resonated with me as I watched Donald Trump tell his supporters the election was rigged, and then cited the fact that many people believed his claims as a reason for why those claims had to be taken seriously. Bit by bit, Trump led his supporters deeper into this fantasy world, encouraging them to ignore mountains of evidence of fake news and instead buy into the Wickiality he was creating. All that was left to do was substitute reality with the new construction, which is what many of those rioters wanted to do on January 6th. Perhaps by better understanding RPGs and the games they have inspired, we can better prepare ourselves to combat other such attacks on reality in the future. But role-playing games don't just have to be important because they can explain national emergencies. They can also help us deal with other worldwide catastrophes. In the middle of the pandemic, many people have discovered that the things you used to be able to do around a table with a group of friends can now just as easily be done in a Zoom meeting around a virtual platform. In fact, it's even easier in many ways. With everyone having their own screen and the Dungeon Master having access to pre-made maps and graphics, let alone platforms like Tabletop Simulator or Roll20 or Dungeons & Dragons Beyond, each of which facilitates the ins and outs of keeping track of rules and abilities and stats. One of my friends picked up a well-paying job as a paid DM for online groups, as RPGs got even more attention during social distancing. I think it's very telling that one of the most popular video games of the pandemic was Animal Crossing on the Nintendo Switch. If you're not familiar with the game, it's about as tame a fare as you can imagine. You play a new villager on an island, and it's all about making a house, inviting friends to the island, and doing simple activities like fishing, collecting seashells, catching bugs, and maybe playing the turnip market to try and strike it rich. There are no end bosses, no frantic button mashing. You just take on the role of someone else living a much simpler existence. My kids have played hours and hours of it. Who am I kidding? So have I. The real world might have been going crazy, but the world in Animal Crossing was brighter, simpler, and easier to navigate.